Hi, I'm John Schneider, Jonathan Kent from Smallville, and you are listening to The Jackals Head on PSN.
Now, I was looking at your bio, and you've been around in the comic book industry for quite a long time, over 25 years now. Let me ask you, being that you've been around so long, what are some of the favorite comics that you've worked in, and what's some of the lines you've worked on that you've really enjoyed over the last 25 years?
I've always been a big fan of the cosmic superheroes, so Silver Surfer, Adam Warlock, and then the Inhumans, the Black Bolt, and those kind of obscure characters. The mainstream stuff. Growing up with, I was a big Daredevil and Avengers fan. I have quite a collection of that stuff there. But it's after doing over 450 books over the last 25 years, it's quite a coup for me to get to work on all the characters. And there are some that I've probably worked on, but not in their own books. Like I think I've done Daredevil very few times, but maybe on a Spider-Man Marvel Tales cover.
Right.
Or I think I did a dream sequence in an issue of Hulk that was 12 pages, but never really the Hulk. And the X-Men stuff I've done is limited to the X-Men movie adaptation from the first movie, which they made a Wolverine prequel out of, and a couple little things, but not too much there either. But I had runs on Iron Man and the Punisher for quite a while, and Doctor Strange for when I first came back to Marvel after working at DC for 4 years. And then at DC, I got to work on Detective Comics, which was the original Batman from the late 1930s. So the issues I did were like 775 or something. And really nothing with Superman or Green Lantern, but I did do some Justice League books. And I lie about the Green Lantern. I guess I did a Parallax one-shot called The Final Night, where Hal Jordan takes out the Sun Eater to help, and Negus dies. And then in the interim of doing that, I got to work on Aquaman too, which is nice, and some Wonder Woman. So all the core characters there.
That's amazing. Let me ask you, how did you get exactly into the comic book business?
I was a collector as a kid, and I read a lot. And when I was in high school, the guidance counselor said to me, you have to make a decision what you want to do with the rest of your life. And I really wasn't prepared at the age of 17 and a half, 18 years old to decide on that. But I thought I would like to do. I was making films. I was like a Super 8 filmmaker back then, and I did Super 8 films where I'd be like a Dirty Harry kind of guy, or I'd play Clint Eastwood in a Western in a poncho. And I was also into the comics, so they kind of thought maybe I would be into animation. So I went to the School of Visual Arts, and I took animation classes. Originally, I started there because I knew Will Eisner from The Spirit was a teacher there, and that was a big coup for me to want to be there. And when I went there, I found out that as much as I love Will Eisner, I wasn't really sold on becoming a comic book artist, and I went more into the animation field. But at the time, back in early 1980s, there wasn't really computer animation. It was all 2D drawn, and we had to draw. My animation thesis was going to be about 1,200 drawings, and about 700 I don't know, somewhere. I know it was about 770 drawings for 1 minute of hand-drawn animation, and I knew that after about 200 or 300 drawings that I was starting to crack. It wasn't really for me. And then I went full circle, and I went back into comic book stuff at the time. But as far as getting into the business, what was nice about the School of Visual Arts is the perspective teacher there was his name was Sal Almondola, and he was the new talent coordinator at DC Comics. And he took me up to his office and let me do some samples. And he said after I saw samples that he thought I would be professional if I stuck with it. And that was the kind of thing I just needed, to inspire me to move forward. And I guess a couple of years later, I think within 2 years, actually, I probably got a job at Marvel Comics when John Romita Sr., who I was reading his Spider-Man comics, at the time, called me up and offered me a job at Marvel Comics on staff, which blew me away because, first of all, here I am reading his comics in the back of my, the station wagon at the drive-in movie, and now he's calling me up offering me a job years later. And I actually couldn't accept the job the first 2 times he offered me because I was living in Long Island with a 57-mile commute to New York City, and they were talking about paying me like $4.50 an hour, and I just couldn't afford it. So after the third time, he told me we could probably offer you other work options like doing assisting work and things like that. So I thought if I didn't take it at some point, I would regret it. So third time was a charm.
Let me ask you, for the last 10 years, you've been working on a project called Banana Tales. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Banana Tale was a labor of love for me. When the comic book business got a little thin after the big boom in the early 90s, we saw a lot of us saw the income change, and it was a tough nut to swallow. The speculators in the market disappeared. They went on to Beanie Babies or Yu-Gi-Oh cards or whatever. Pokemon. And we were selling. The books were selling ridiculous amounts. I think at the time the demographics showed there might have been 500,000 readers in the country, but I did 6 books back in 1992 that sold between 400 and 600,000 copies on one book. And when you're a reader, and you're a kid, you're not so liquid to go out and expand on. Marvel was putting out 100-something books. DC had to match that. There's Image and all these independents. There's probably as many as 300 comic books on the newsstand at any one time.
Right.
And so what prompted them? And of course, the ones that sold the best were the ones that were the highly advertised and the more the ones that were more well known. But everybody took advantage of that situation. But Banana Tale was something that started out when things started to get lean for me, and I realized that I am in the business of publishing, and I am connected with a lot of people in the comic book business. So what I try to do is my father, who was always I called him the great procrastinator. He was always an idea man, and he always had great ideas, but he never followed anything through. So I said to him, let's do something for the kids. And at the time, my daughter was 4 years old, and my son was a newborn. My daughter just started second year of college, So it's been a long haul. But my father came up with the idea, and I had it illustrated it, and I almost had some fortune with Golden Books. Who it was big. The Pokey Little Puppy. And the Saggy Baggy Elephant was something. In fact, they called me up and they offered me to come in and meet with their people. They're actually considering buying 2 of the Banana Tale characters to be co-stars in the Saggy Baggy Elephant.
Right.
At the time, I didn't even know what the Saggy Baggy Elephant was until I saw it on Disney Channel later as like an in-between cartoon, or a 3-minute cartoon between 2 episodes of something else. And I thought it was the most boring thing I had ever seen. So for me, Banana Tale was a lot more exciting. But the fact that they were telling me that they were going to come up with a plan for me and buy my characters just blew me away. But that next week, or within a couple of weeks, they went in bankruptcy, and everything fell apart for me. But so I, at some point, I realized that I had something special here, but I didn't have someone to take it to fruition. So I sat on it for a few years and thought about. I sent it to other people. Simon & Schuster had it, and they were interested at one point, but nobody really pulled the trigger on it. So when my father passed away in 2002, I decided that I would do it myself, and I self-published the first book, and a couple of years later I did an activity book, and started to steamroll a little bit. I sold out my first book in 2000 print run. I had a 2000 print run, and I sold it out in 4 months, and I reprinted it. I was Diamond Hot Pick of the Month, which was nice. Diamond, bought about 1,100 books through comic shops, and really, comic shops were not what it was about. It was a children's book, but I think because of my affiliation with comics, people were curious about that, and I was able to get some website, support. Wizard ran some images, some articles with me, and Silver Bullets and The Pulse, and everybody, because of the interest of comic books going to children's books. So I kept moving forward with it, and recently, in the last 2 months, Image has published my newest book called Banana Tail's Colorful Adventure. So it's kind of funny. Now you have a comic book publisher. They're probably the third largest in the country publishing my children's book.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
It's cool.
Yeah, it is. And there's going to be a computer-generated film out of this, right? Is that in the works?
There is. Yeah. Full Sail University is a school down in Florida. They're a recording and animation school. And one of the teachers there, Steve Akehurst, who teaches 3D drawing, took it on with some of his other guys. Actually, there was a fellow there who I met at a Pittsburgh Comic-Con in, I don't know, had to be 7 years ago, and I sat with him at a table, and he said, you know, I'm an animation major at Full Sail University, and I'd love to do something with Banana Tail one day. And I said, sure. I never thinking it would ever amount to anything, and about 2 years later, he sends me this 38-second computer-generated film that he did, and he actually took it to the teachers and said, this is a great character, maybe we should do some kind of a class study using the character as a focus for a study, you know, to animate. And I was all game for that. And they did about 4 minutes of animation with the class, you know, throughout the classes over a couple of years. The problem being that the students come and go. Some students are better animators than others,
right?
And some of the stuff looked better than other stuff, and some stuff needed to be reanimated. And it never really it never got finished. But I do have a nice piece of film from it. And hopefully that's something I can use in the future to, you know, create something.
Hopefully there's a chance you could create an actual cartoon line out of that. That'd be awesome. You could do something like that. Now, before we let you go here, because we're almost out of time, but let me ask you, is there any comic book lines that you haven't worked on yet that you really are interested in maybe taking a look at in the next couple of years?
You know, I would love to do more Green Lantern.
More Green Lantern?
Superman would be cool. I'm not a huge Superman fan. I'm really a Batman fan more than Superman.
Me too.
But,
you can tell up here.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And I kind of lost my way at Marvel. I was at Marvel for many years in the beginning, but I'd like to go back and do some stuff at Marvel. There's a lot of exciting stuff over there. But right now, Dark Horse has been taking care of me.
Tell us about that. You're working on the Star Wars series now, right?
Right. I got called by a friend who couldn't do something on something called Purge. It was a Star Wars Darth Vader one-shot. You familiar with it?
Yeah. I am familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, okay. Probably more than me, but... it was all Darth Vader issue, and I got to do about half an issue. And oddly enough, the reason I got to do it is because the ink artist lived in Brazil, and they couldn't get the pages from him in rapid fashion, so they needed somebody in the States. So they offered me the job, and I guess I did okay. So after that, they offered me this 12-part, 7-page per part webcomic called Blood of the Empire, which is now, if you Google Blood of the Empire, you know, you'll find it, and you can actually, I think they're up to part 8.
Yep.
And actually, the fan press was so excited about what we did with the art and the story that Lucasfilms just hired the art team, me included, to do another 5-part Old Republic series directly after this. And then they're going to collect the webcomic into a graphic novel in March of next year. It'll be 84 pages. So I do have another job with that, and it's kind of nice that the fans like that. It's always nice to be loved.
That's great, man. When that's ready to be released, we'd love to have you back on here on the show in the future.
Thanks, Angel. I appreciate you having me on.
Take care, Mark.